Hello, I'm Keith Plah, host of this channel, The People's Pigeon, a channel that aims to give highly detailed reports on people of interest, global events, and criminal organizations. This series will focus on Yevgeny Viktorovich Prigozhin, taking you through all the important life events that determined his course and actions in life. To better tell his story, I'm going to first give some details about the Soviet Union and Leningrad at the time, as to better place Prigozhin's birth in history. When Yevgeny Prigozhin was born, the city he was born in was called Leningrad, a name it took on after Vladimir Lenin's death in 1924. Before that, the city was called Petrograd from 1914 to 1924, after its 1703 founder, Tsar Peter the Great, in an anti-German response to World War I. Before 1914, the city's original name was Saint Petersburg, and that was the name it retook after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991. The headline on international news worldwide at the time of Yevgeny Prigozhin's birth in 1961 was about a ballet dancer, Rudolf Nureyev, who on June 16, 1961, while on tour with the Leningrad State Kirov Ballet Company in Le Bourget, France, fled from his ballet company as they were about to board an airplane at Le Bourget Airport. He ran for two police officers and petitioned them for political asylum, proclaiming, "I want to be free." The asylum was granted. The Soviet Union was in such poor shape that its citizens were being correctly granted refugee status. This was 15 days after Yevgeny Prigozhin was born. Born on June 1, 1961, in Leningrad, Soviet Union, Yevgeny Viktorovich Prigozhin was the only child that his parents would conceive together. His mother, Violetta Prigozhina, a nurse at the time of his birth, and his father, Viktor Prigozhin, an engineer in a mine near Leningrad, raised Yevgeny together until 1970, when Yevgeny Prigozhin was 9 years old and his father was killed in a mining collapse. Violetta Prigozhina sent Yevgeny Prigozhin to live with his great-uncle for several years in Zhovty Vody, Soviet Union. Yevgeny's great-uncle, Efim Prigozhin, was a scientist for the Soviet Union, who has no notable achievements to his name. When Yevgeny Prigozhin finally returned home after spending several years with his great-uncle, his mother had remarried to a man named Samuel Fribenovich Zadkoy, a ski instructor who would serve as a role model for Yevgeny throughout his teen years. Following in the path of his stepfather, Yevgeny Prigozhin was enrolled in Leningrad Sports Boarding School No. 62 with the hopes of pursuing a career as a cross-country skier professionally. He attended the Leningrad Sports Boarding School alongside Vladimir Salnikov, Olympic freestyle swimmer, and Alexander Dyatin, Olympic gymnast. His dreams were cut down, however, when around the age of 16, Yevgeny became unable to ski at a competitive level due to a serious leg injury. As many once hopeful athletes do, Yevgeny became a physical fitness instructor at a children's sports school and was employed as such between the years of 1977 and 1979. In 1979, Yevgeny Prigozhin found himself facing a 2.5-year suspended sentence, the punishment being hard labor for a theft, the details of which remain unclear. Later that same year, he was found guilty and convicted and sent to a probationer's boarding house in Novgorod, Soviet Union. The boarding house was coincidentally located on Leningradskaya Street, a street bearing the name of the city he was sent away from. His time in Novgorod was to be spent working at a chemical plant, but his time there would be short-lived. Just a few months after being sent to Novgorod, Yevgeny Prigozhin fled back to Leningrad. Now a fugitive of the law in the Soviet Union, Prigozhin dove headfirst into criminality as a career choice. His first order of business? Finding a crew to affiliate with, which he did do in short order. Upon returning to Leningrad, Yevgeny Prigozhin fell in with a band of thieves. Alexei Bushman, a 21-year-old who had already been once divorced, fathered a child, and had a criminal record in the Soviet Union. Valentina Makiko, a young adult at the time who was an ex-convict from the Bryansk region of the Soviet Union, and the only woman amongst them. And from Chelyabinsk, Soviet Union, Vladislav K. and Alexander E., whose last names are unknown due to their status as minors during their time in the group. Together in league with his fellow bandits, Yevgeny Prigozhin would go on to commit a number of rather organized crimes. So disorganized and brazen, in fact, that one eyewitness tells the story of seeing Yevgeny Prigozhin fail to gain entry to an apartment window one night. Upon being scared away by witnesses, Prigozhin then decided to return again the next night with Alexei Bushman in tow. The two of them together were witnessed completing the successful robbery of the Leningrad apartment the next night. That night, their earnings were the equivalent to several months' salary in the Soviet Union, about 980 rubles. So while their methods were severely lacking in intelligence, their results were outstanding. The gang of thieves would continue on this way for several months between 1979 and 1980, with home burglary being their main source of income and sloppy work being their modus operandi. On March 20th, 1980, Yevgeny Prigozhin was at a lounge celebrating a recent robbery committed earlier that day, in which Yevgeny Prigozhin convinced a local Leningrad man that he could sell him denim jeans, contraband in the Soviet Union, for 200 rubles, only for Alexei Bushman to take the man's money and for both Prigozhin and Bushman to flee the scene. At one point during their celebration on the evening of March 20th, a visibly wealthy woman in a fine coat caught the attention of Yevgeny Prigozhin, so much so that he proclaimed her the queen to his associates and set out to follow and rob this queen figure, who was the unfortunate target of his fixation that night. The well-dressed woman entered a taxi and headed off into the city streets. Prigozhin and his bandits in pursuit flagged down a taxi of their own and tailed her. The woman exited her cab in an affluent section of Leningrad. Prigozhin and his gang did the same. Not seeing any witnesses and sensing that the time was right, Valentina Makeko closed the distance. With Yevgeny Prigozhin at her side, Makeko greeted the woman and offered her cigarettes. As she reached out to accept the offering, Prigozhin seized the woman by the neck and began to strangle her, which she responded to by crying out for help into the night. Prigozhin tightened his grip and completed the task of choking the woman unconscious, then threw her limp body to the floor, where his cohorts immediately began depriving her of her valuables. By the time the nearby policemen who had heard the commotion arrived, the gang had already stripped the woman of her earrings, boots, and coat. The police arrested Yevgeny Prigozhin, Valentina Makeko, and Alexei Bushman at the scene of the crime. Later, Vladislav K., who fled at the arrival of the police, was captured after a short foot chase. In the end, it would be Vladislav K. that was the gang's downfall. Interrogation practices in the Soviet Union were typically at the discretion of the officers in the room at the time of the interrogation. While a list of procedures may have existed, there certainly exists a great number of first-hand accounts of torture, both physical and psychological, being employed in the Soviet Union to extract confessions. While the methods used to convince Vladislav K. to speak are unknown, we do know that Vladislav led the police to the gang's communal apartment in Leningrad. Inside of this apartment, a treasure trove of stolen goods, each of which could be directly linked to different robberies committed throughout 1979 and 1980 in Leningrad. From March 20th, 1980 until October 6, 1981, Yevgeny Prigozhin and his gang most likely sat in pretrial detention. A quick caveat. Doing research on the topic of pretrial detention procedures in the Soviet Union led me to learn that there was, in fact, precedent regarding pretrial detention. Pretrial detention was supposed to be 12 months maximum, unless the prisoner was there for political charges, and even then, there needed to be petition to the court to explain why that prisoner remained in pretrial detention each month after the legal 12 permitted. However, this research led me to learn that this was not something that actually occurred, merely it was something that was supposed to occur. There exists many accounts of non-political prisoners remaining more than 12 months in pretrial detention in the Soviet Union. And of the political prisoners who did remain in pretrial detention longer than 12 months, no documented attempts exist to justify their extended detention for any of the cases that I could find. Also important to note, in 1978, the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union set precedent adopting the ideal that suspects would be considered innocent until proven guilty. This precedent was at times adhered to and other times it was ignored, making it useless to rely on. On October 6, 1981, over 18 months after being arrested, Yevgeny Prigozhin and his entire gang sat on trial in a Leningrad courtroom in the Soviet Union. Their charges vary. All accomplices faced robbery charges. Valentina Makeko, Alexei Bushman, Yevgeny Prigozhin, and Vladislav K. faced additional charges for the strong-armed robbery on the evening of March 20, 1980. Makeko, Bushman, and Prigozhin also faced an additional charge for involving a minor in a crime. Bushman and Prigozhin faced the harshest sentences of all for the added charges of fraud for their denim jeans scam on March 20, 1980. During the trial, multiple eyewitnesses and victims of the gang came forward, putting to rest any doubts of their innocence and any possibility of the gang going free. As the trial went on, charges against the group piled up, and it became clear Alexei Bushman and Yevgeny Prigozhin faced the harshest sentences of the group. In an act of solidarity and an attempt to lessen the burden on her accomplices, Valentina Makeko protested that one of the robberies committed by Prigozhin and Bushman was actually perpetrated by her alone, without their knowledge or involvement. State solicitors did not buy this at all, as Prigozhin and Bushman knew the exact location of the crime and stated so of their own free will, and Makeko did not. Regardless of this fact, the judge presiding allowed the admission of guilt to stand, thus bringing the prison sentences of Prigozhin and Bushman down and increasing Makeko's own sentence. Every member of the gang was found guilty, and the final sentencing for each member of the gang was as follows. Vladislav K., a suspended sentence. Alexander E., 1 year imprisonment. Valentina Makeko, 10 years in maximum security penitentiary. Alexei Bushman, 11 years in maximum security penitentiary. and Yevgeny Prigozhin, 12 years in maximum security penitentiary, and 1 additional year in maximum security penitentiary to complete his suspended sentence from 1979, to be served consecutively as a 13-year sentence. The only information that can be found on Yevgeny Prigozhin's incarceration is contradictory. One account is merely a bullet point list from an ethically hacked document taken from an email server owned by Capital Legal Services, Yevgeny Prigozhin's legal team at the time of its writing. The October 2021 email was written as a PR response to Prigozhin's growing reputation as the head of a Russian troll farm, for which he received a criminal indictment by the United States of America. In the emails, Prigozhin's lawyers alleged that at the outset of Prigozhin's imprisonment, he violated the terms of his incarceration regularly, although no mention of what that means is given. The leaked document claims that in 1985, Prigozhin had a change of heart, and while in solitary confinement for one of his many alleged violations, he began to read intensely. A non-disputable fact is that in 1988, citing good behavior as an inmate, the Supreme Court of the USSR elected to reduce Yevgeny Prigozhin's sentence to 9 years, giving Prigozhin just 2 more years to serve. At this point in time, we must once again refer to the leaked email written by Prigozhin's legal team from Capital Legal Services. The email claims upon receiving his sentence reduction, Yevgeny Prigozhin petitioned the Supreme Court of the USSR to be transferred to a medium-security residential colony, where he could earn wages as a lumber worker. According to the lawyer's email, this is where he remained until his early release in 1990. The other account of Yevgeny Prigozhin's time in prison comes from an equally unreputable source. However, it's only unreputable because it's unverifiable. Several circumstances of this opposing narrative led me to personally believe that it may hold some merit, and for that reason, I will be including it in this video. A video of a shirtless man gained traction in 2022 on Telegram and eventually on Reddit. The video is of a man who voluntarily identifies himself as Sasha Guara. Guara most likely being a criminal alias, not a real family name. He claims to have spent time with Yevgeny Prigozhin in prison. The man's abdomen is decorated with a few tattoos, one of which is 2 iron crosses displayed on his chest as if they were part of a military uniform. This particular tattoo is a calling card in Russian prison today, and was also popular in prisons of the Soviet Union. This tattoo is given to those prisoners who oppose authority and have actively engaged in violence against police, prison guards, or the KGB. Sasha Guara claims that Yevgeny Prigozhin spent his time in prison as a rooster, a member of the lowest caste of society in the Soviet Union's prisons. Men of this caste are beaten, forced to sleep and live near the communal toilets, and sexually abused frequently throughout their time in prison. Sasha also claims to have been personally filleted by Yevgeny Prigozhin. These are very easy claims to make. Anyone could do this. The key details here are that this man certainly passes a visual check for his claims. He has the correct tattoos and is close enough in age to Yevgeny Prigozhin at the time of the video was taken. It is also important to state that in the Soviet Union and modern Russian prison culture, honor is something people kill over. For this man, Sasha, to make these claims so publicly about Prigozhin could genuinely mean death. Yet he chooses to do so anyways. Neither of these 2 accounts of Yevgeny Prigozhin's time in prison should be entirely believed, lacking any evidence either way. But certainly the account from his lawyers comes from a less trustworthy source. Thank you for watching Part 1. Click here to continue the series in Part 2. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and share this video if you enjoyed it.